It's time for Talk on the Block, and I can tell you Talk on the Block is sponsored by ISA Trading Limited and New India Assurance. We'll be introducing our first guest shortly, but let's take a break. ISA Trading Limited and New India Assurance. We'll be back after this.
Looking for power and performance in your cleaning game? Say hello to Sapolio, the world-class brand trusted by homes across the globe. Sapolio Chloro Bleach kills 99.9% of viruses and bacteria. Whether it's your bathroom, kitchen, or laundry, Sapolio Chloro gets the job done. And for laundry, try Sapolio Ultra Laundry Detergents with floral, citrus, and gentle baby formulas. Deep cleaning, fresh scent, tough on stains in sizes from 450 grams to 4 kg. Stains won't stand a chance against the Polio Color Stain Remover 3 in 1. It removes stains, delivers high performance, and comes at a great price. Available in 550 ml, 950 ml, and 1800 ml. Want something lemony fresh? Grab Sapolio liquid detergent, light, powerful, and perfectly sized at 200 ml. Don't forget to disinfect the smart way with Sapolio disinfectant. Kills 99.9% of germs and comes in pine, lavender, baby, lime, apple, and floral scents. Available from 800 ml to 4.9 liters. Sapolio, clean power, fresh life. Available now at ISA Trading Limited, your favorite shopping location here in Dominica. When you think clean, think Sapolio. Think ISA Trading Limited. We are making a difference for you.
The New India Insurance Company has reopened its doors in Portsmouth, offering the same great services you get in Roseau. Motor vehicle insurance, home and business owners, fire and related perils, public liability, and so much more. Come, visit us today for insurance with a personal touch on Bay Street, Portsmouth, or call us at 445-4023. We are ready to serve you.
All right, Dominica, we're back, and on the line with me is a man who has given so much to Dominica and who has helped preserve some of the most precious moments in history. At this time, we're going to be speaking on the history of village feasts in Dominica, and we'll be delving into that topic as time goes by. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you historian Dr. Lennox Honeychurch. Dr. Honeychurch, can you hear me?
Yes, I can just hear you. Uh-huh.
Yes, we see you and we're hearing you very clearly as well. Let me just thank you so much for taking the time to come on board this afternoon. I know you're very busy, and so we'll get into it. So, the history.
Yeah, just trying to fit this in.
Yes, yes, I appreciate that. The history of village feasts in Dominica. Could you take us back for just a moment to the origins of village feasts in our country? How did these celebrations begin, Dr. Honeychurch?
Well, of course, it's all tied in with the Roman Catholic Church and the arrival of the Roman Catholic Church here, essentially mainly from Martinique. And this was before the British took over Dominica.
Yeah.
Dominica was supposedly left for the Kalinagos forever from a treaty in 1660. Dominica was supposed to be left to the Kalinago people in perpetuity. But of course, you know human greed already. And there is this island unoccupied, sitting in between Martinique and Guadeloupe. And people of different ethnic groups deciding, well, we have this island available, we're going to take it over. So you had people of African descent who were enslaved in Martinique and Guadeloupe. They realized all they needed was to go across the canal, the channels, and enter Dominica, and they would be able to be free, maroons in the hills. Then you had the Kalinago people who were already here, and those Kalinagos who were over in places like St. Lucia, St. Vincent, even Guadeloupe, deciding, well, we've got this treaty, let us retreat and we will be free in Dominica. And then you had a lot of white indentured servants. These were people mainly from France who were called engagés. They were engaged to work on the plantations. They had to work for a certain number of years. And they left Martinique and Guadeloupe, and they came across also to Dominica to get a piece of land for themselves.
Yeah.
So the whole thing basically stems from Martinique and Guadeloupe, and of course from the French culture. And the French culture was Roman Catholic. So therefore, when they and this included the people of African descent who had already become Roman Catholics, particularly in Martinique. So they came across, and there were also French missionaries that came to Dominica to try to convert the Kalinagos to Christianity, although the Kalinagos really were not too interested in that at all. They preferred their own traditional heritage and culture and beliefs. And so eventually you had these Roman Catholic influenced people of different ethnic groups settling in Dominica. And a few churches were established around the island. The first church that we have recorded is at Collyho in about 1650, where the church is now in Collyho, in the central part of Collyho. They actually built a Kalinago Kabe, and that was the first church. That's what they used as the first church. And then in the 1690, you had a rival from Martinique. He was a free black man of African descent, of course, from Martinique. He had been essentially brought up by the Jesuit religious order. His name was Jeannot Rolle, and he established himself at Grand Bay, down by the bay at Grand Bay, and he got, that's a whole story in itself. He got built a stone cross, and that cross still exists over how many 100 years later at the
Wow.
top of the cemetery in Grand Bay. So I'm
Yeah.
just giving you that to show that already there was established in Dominica various people who were followers of the Roman Catholic Church. In 1730, once again, the British had not come yet, but more and more French people were coming, and they set up the first church in Roseau. There was a Father Martel, and he organized the building of the first church in Roseau exactly on the site where the cathedral is now. But it was essentially just a wooden church, small wooden church with a thatched roof of cane and roseau reeds, and that was from 1730. And because the road from the church led down to the bayfront where all the boats landed, that is essentially where basically the tourist cruise ship dock is in that area. So the street that went up from there straight to the church was called La Rue l'Église, Church Street, and it is still there today. Church Street leads from the bayfront right up and to the side door of the cathedral. But in the days of 1730 and Father Martel, it was the main door of the Roman Catholic Church. So not yet a cathedral. That had to wait another 100 years and more. So essentially, let us understand, you're established there with the Roman Catholic faith, and the British have not yet turned up. They have not yet captured Dominica. And by rights, the island is supposed to be left to the French, to the Kalinagos forever, but the French people are beginning to come in and claim land and take over. And so with them, they bring their religion. And the Roman Catholic faith, of course, has many saints. And so there were certain communities that adopted certain feast days for their saints. And some of them are still observed and celebrated today. Uh, so we have a few of them. I'm going to read out. I've written something about this already.
Yeah.
So in point, there are two national shrines that have feast days for the appearance of Our Lady of Lourdes, that is in Soufrière, but that's much, much later, and La Salette in Point Michel. So those are national shrines that were created in the 19th century, about 120 years ago. So those are two major feasts. And uh, then you have in Newtown, you have Fatima, which is even later than that, early 20th century. And then in places, I'm just using a few of them, like St. Joseph, although St. Joseph Parish, the French divided Dominica into quarters. So the only quartier that had a saint's name was St. Joseph. So, but their patron saint was St. Gerard. So you see, it's not necessary that you have a parish name, and the feast is also the feast of that particular saint. We're going to see a little later on. So we have Masak Maho, which is the feast of St. Anne, who is a patron saint of those communities. And St. Joseph, as I said, it was a French parish, but they chose their patron saint as St. Gerard. And then in Bawi, now Bawi is the Kalinago name, which became the Creole name. And then the British came and they established a plantation, and it named it after a town in Britain called Salisbury. And then we get it registered on the records of Dominica. But the name that it was originally called in the Kalinago times by Kalinago people was Bawi. And when the French Creole came and was introduced to Dominica, it was also Bawi. But
Maui.
then sometime in the 1960s, people started using Salisbury, which was the plantation name. So unfortunately, we more use Salisbury now than the indigenous name of Bowie. It's only now and
Wow.
again you hear people talk about Bowie.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Salisbury's saint feast is Saint Teresa. Although that is not there, we have no official parish name for Saint Teresa. This is the religious parish. So what is complicated is that you have the official parishes established by the British when they came, and I will
Mm,
deal with that. And
mm,
then you have the Roman Catholic parishes, which are the religious parishes. So here's a case in Salisbury where the patron saint is Saint Teresa. Then in Grand Bay and also in Saint-Sauveur, they adopted Saint Isidore. So you have the Feast of Saint Isidore both in Grand Bay and also in Saint-Sauveur, Good Hope, that whole area there. And in Viecas, you have Saint Andre, which also happens to be the name of the British parish that Viecas, Thibault, and all these villages are in. I'll explain that. And then at Loda, you have in the Roseau Valley and the hills behind, you have these little villages who decide they're going to have a seat from themselves. So we have, for instance, Loda, which confusingly they also call St. Anne, although the Masak Maho people have the Feast of St. Anne. Trafalgar is St. Mary Magdalene. And then in Girardel, you have Our Lady of Perpetual Succor. So you see that the Virgin is used quite widely around Dominica, because if you want to give Roseau a religious feast day, as it used to be, it was Our Lady of the Assumption. The actual cathedral and the church before it was called Notre Dame de Bonport, and that translates to Our Lady of Fair Haven. So that essentially would be the feast for Roseau. Okay. Um, so let us, and there are many other French parishes. For instance, in La Plaine, you have Saint Xavier and St. Patrick, of course, adopted by Granby as well as St. Isidore. So it makes it a little confusing. But anyway, and And the territory, they gave it Saint Marie of the Caribs, Saint
Mm.
Marie. So they adapted Saint Mary, Mary Magdalene, Mary, not Magdalene, the Virgin Mary, to that as well. And later on, we will find that places like Marigot and Wesley were taken over by Protestant people, mainly from the Antigua and the Leeward Islands. So you would say Our Lady of La Soie for Wesley, but that's only for the Roman Catholics, because the Methodists, and for a time in Marigot there was an Anglican church, Church of England, and the
Oh.
Methodists were the ones there, and they, of course, do not follow saints. So we leave that French business where it is there. And we'll go to the time in 1761 when the British capture Roseau, because
Mhm.
by this time now the British are saying, look, we made a treaty that was going to leave Dominica for the Kalinagos totally forever. But now all these French people are coming in. So basically, Dominica has turned into a French place by squatting. The story of Dominica, very often in villages and so, is a story of squatting. So they came and they squatted. They're from Guadeloupe and Martinique. And the British said, look, this is unfair. They have broken the treaty. So they attacked Roseau on the 6th of June, 1761, and they captured Roseau. And by capturing Roseau, they captured the whole of Dominica. So a few years later, in the Treaty of Paris, they decided that Dominica would be ceded to Britain. It would be basically controlled by Britain. So immediately now, the British sent down surveyors to chop up Dominica into lots for sale, because they wanted to establish big plantations to produce sugar, to make money, and all of that. So the British surveyors come to Dominica, headed by a guy called John Byers, and he produces a map. And that map is the beginning of all land holding in Dominica. If anybody listening to me has a title deed for land in Dominica, the origin of that title deed is the Byers map of 1776. And everything
Wow.
comes from there, chopping up, and the registry, lands and surveys, everything comes from the Byers map of 1776 up
Wow.
to today. So Byers also, the British, also subdivide Dominica into parishes. Now, this is confusing because the French have already come and they set up their parishes in the religious, for the religious purpose. And the British come and set up their parishes for the basically political purpose. So we have the main parish for the capital of the day, which was originally Portsmouth. So it's the parish of St. John. Then, because of the mosquitoes and the yellow fever and the deaths and the unhealthiness, and they didn't realize what it was that was causing this disease, they shifted to Roseau. Roseau was then declared as the parish of St. George. Now, St. George is the patron saint of Britain, of the United Kingdom. So that's where we get St. George. Then other parishes along, so I'll just follow them along the coast. So from Roseau, if we go south, we're getting into the parish of St. Luke. Then we
Mm.
get St. Mark. Those are the smallest parishes in Dominica. Around the corner, we get into St. Patrick. Now, St. Patrick is the patron saint of Ireland. Now, the British have taken over Dominica and they want to recreate Dominica as if it is the British Isles, the head of the British Empire. So we have St. George for England. We go around the corner down south and we have St. Patrick for Ireland. And St. Patrick starts at the back of Soufriere, bordering with St. Mark and St. Luke. And then it goes all the way around beyond Delis and up into La Plaine area. And it is the parish of St. Patrick. Then we go on the next step, St. David. Now, St. David is from the border with La Plaine, going all the way up to the Pigua River, Hatton Garden, Pigua, through Casa Bruce territory and all of that. So that's St. David, and St. David is representing Wales, the nation of Wales, which is in part of the United Kingdom.
Mhm.
And from then we get the biggest parish of all, and that is the parish of St. Andrew. And you see already the Viecas French people have adopted André, the André, parish of St. Andrew. And then you get across, you're back into the parish of St. John, which is for the capital city of Portsmouth, which they gave up, they changed. And then from there you go into St. Peter, the parish of St. Peter, and then you go on down into St. Joseph and St. Paul. And from St. Paul, you're back into St. George.
George.
So I'm giving you those British parishes, but that does not mean that the feast days are associated with those parishes.
Mm.
St. Peter, yes, because in the Collyho area, St. Peter being the patron saint of fishermen, and for a long time, Collyho, and those coastal areas like Coulibistry, Dublin, Bioche, they were very heavily fishermen. And so it becomes the fishermen feast, and it is celebrated around the time of the feast of St. Peter, St. Pierre. And then similarly, you can have St. Paul or St. Joseph, but they have fishermen. So the fishermen within those parishes have their feast they celebrate at the same time of St. Peter.
St. Peter.
Similarly with Soufriere and Scots Head. So basically what I'm telling you is there's an overlap, but it is the religious feasts that are mainly observed. You will not hear about the feast of St. George. Well, it's also, St. George is also an Anglican Church of England saint representing Britain. So that's not common. And the ones I mentioned up in the hills, like Loda, St. Anne, Trafalgar, St. Mary Magdalene, and Girardel. So during those times, the feasts were deeply religious. So I remember as a boy, for instance, in Calibichy, the feast of St. Peter, Fête la Saint-Pierre, and you would have a church service in the morning at the chapel. Even the bishop would come up, and you'd have a procession going through the village and ending up where the boats are brought up, where they call the by the bay in Calibichy, and the boats would be decorated with flowers and lined up along the shore, and the boats would be blessed as at the end of the procession. And then for the rest of the day, people would fete, they'd have their meals, they'd go and visit their friends. Also, a lot of people would come across from Marie-Galante. You'd have a lot of French fishermen coming from Marie-Galante, and they're participating in everything. Because remember, when these fishermen from Calibichy and Astimé and so went out to fish, they would meet fishermen from the south of Guadeloupe, but
Mhm.
particularly from Marie-Galante. So a great friendship would develop there. So that's how you had the interaction. But essentially, apart from a little jingping and music, it was mainly religious. It's in the last few years that the band and the music and the DJs have completely eclipsed the religious aspect.
I see.
So when you hear about a feast now, yes, there's the religious note is made, but essentially this is modern day fete with hi-fi and people driving in their cars from all over and coming, and their bouillon and all the activities. Nothing really traditional in it, because the modern fete has taken over from the religious aspect of it.
So let's
So
on that note,
that is a
yeah, yeah. On that note, I just wanted
yes.
to then talk about the evolution then of the village feasts as it relates to social functions in rural communities.
All right. Well, that's it. Basically, you want me to expand on what I've just said. All
Yeah.
right. So, fine. The other thing is that for a while, particularly under Rosie Douglas, when he was PAL rep or political activist in Portsmouth, not necessarily even a member of the House of Assembly,
Mm,
um, Rosie Douglas promoted the Fête Marin because of the links that he had with the political activists in places like Guadeloupe and Marie-Galante. So for a time, Fête Marin was a very big thing in Portsmouth, and this included, of course, the uh, let us say the social festivals related to that. Yes, you would have a religious mass, but the real big impact then was the music and the drinking and the dancing and all of that kind of thing. So in certain villages, that came out to the fore. I just want to say that one of the other things that really cut down on the religious aspect of the feast was after the Second World War in the 1940s, as Dominica's influence moved from Britain and France, it moved more to the United States. And so
mm,
for the early part of the 20th century, Dominica was swamped with missionaries from the Midwest Bible Belt of the USA. And many people were moving away from the Roman Catholic Church, and they were going into Seventh-day Adventists, they were going into Pentecostal and
mm,
Jehovah's Witness, and all of those uh, denominations that were created in the United States and then were brought down here to Dominica and took away from the traditional um, Roman Catholic traditions that were taking place. I mean,
mm,
if you go to the census, for instance, of 1911, you will find that there are only 6 Seventh-day Adventists in Dominica, 6 Seventh-day Adventists in Dominica in 1911. But it spurs, it enlarges once they send down missionaries, and then Dominicans go up to the US and they get deep down inside that. It changes. So you have the Seventh-day Adventists expanding and choosing places like, for instance, Pebush, Bourne, and other places like that. You have Christian Union Mission coming from the United States. Originally, they were called Reformed Methodists, and they chose areas like Castle Bruce, also in the territory, and in central Roseau. And you have those expanding. So that was another impact, moving away from the church uh, aspect, the Roman Catholic Church aspect. But in
mm,
terms of the um, basically social festival, let's put it that way, um, as people moved away from the Roman Catholic Church, or even if they were still in the Roman Catholic Church, the influence of fete, of commercial activity related to feasts, that also grew. So we're now going back to the 1960s, and you will find that bands are being created, whether it's Bell's Combo or
yeah,
earlier bands that existed in Dominica. They will be coming out on the feast days. Midnight Groovers down in Grand Bay, for instance, and that kind of thing.
yeah,
And later on, of course, you would find Triple K and all the others that were developing throughout the 1960s, 70s, mainly into the 80s. And now we have the DJs. So that before they used to depend on the priests, but now they're depending on the DJs. So the DJs are holding court now. They are the ones that are the big boys that are advertised. When you see the posters go out for any feast, you will see a whole list of bands and DJs, and the whole business of whoever the patron saint is involved dies by the wayside. It's only
mm,
mentioned maybe once. You'll see a little church service at 10 a.m., but the whole rest of the thing is totally changed up. And then you will have those two centers for St. Isidore. Now, Granby being such a major area, community, the Fete St. Isidore also grew out of the boundaries of the church and into the big Fete and action. So there again, you have your bands, you have your hi-fi systems. Now, I'll just talk about that a bit because it has affected Carnival. So let us go through the 20th century with instruments. So up to the 1950s, you would have the chanté-mas, the lapo cabuit,
Yeah.
or even brass, like trumpets and so associated with it.
Mm.
Then from the 1950s, we begin taking on steel band from Trinidad. Coming up, the influence of the steel band takes over. And then from the 1970s, actually late 60s, 70, you get the beginning of the hi-fi system. And the hi-fis become bigger and bigger and more loud into the 1970s, 80s, and of course, nowadays it's entirely computerized. And when you see a band going down on the back of a truck, you will see the laptops there and the feeding in
Yeah.
the information they need for the music. So essentially what I'm saying is that gradually the whole pattern of the feast moved into a completely new era, a new kind of era of development.
Mhm.
And so the feasts changed, and then of course you'd have sponsorship. Now before, it's just a little village thing, and the shopkeepers would do a little sales, and that would be that. But now you have the drinks companies and the other commercial companies actually sponsoring. So now you're getting the sponsors from the merchants. So whether it's Carrot Bear or Kubuli or Belfast Rum or whatever, you get that big input. Everybody expects sponsorship for their
Yeah.
feast. And now, basically, since 2000, particularly since 2000, it is the government, the party in power. They are the ones that are approached for big. I mean, back in the 90s and the 80s, nobody would expect that kind of money to be coming in for financing a feast. But the people now expect that we're having a feast of St. Isidore, whether it's in Good Hope, San Sauveur, or over in Granby. We expect quite a few $1,000s to be put into this feast. So you see how it changes, it adapts over time um, into this new phase of involvement. And it's moved completely away from the traditional early, basically religious aspect. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, I'm jumping back because I'm now remembering when you have those American fundamentalists denominations coming into Dominica, the saints are gone. You're not dealing with saints anymore. Yeah, you're dealing with Jesus alone, more or less. And so the saints have been banned by those religious groups, and they survive within the Roman Catholic community because it's a completely different pattern of religious worship and culture. So I'm basically going through the process. Let's go back quickly. We have 50s steel band. Now, I have some early pictures of Granby, Lally Granby, of course, and there are the steel bands. And in those days, steel pan was around your neck. You would have the steel pans in straps around your neck, and you'd be going up, going down, playing steel band. We're talking about the 1950s into the 60s. And then from the 70s, you would get the odd small music system perched on the back of a pickup. But you'd also have, in places like Granby that maintained it, the Lapo Cabuit and so. and the singing of it, of all the songs related to that.
Mm.
That would overlap into the feasts. So that the feast basically changed radically um, at that time. And some feasts are of bigger prominence than others. For instance, as we said, Isidore in both of those communities um, that I mentioned on the East Coast, you have Saint-Sauveur, and then also in the South, you have Granby. Those feasts are big feasts. They really have become very much bigger. And then in some of the West Coast villages, you will have the feast once again, just like the other places, being mainly hi-fi, powerful hi-fi music that have nothing to do really with Saint Teresa or um, whoever you're talking about, whether it's Saint Anne or Saint Teresa or whoever. I often chuckle with people. I say, well, Jay, if Saint Teresa or Saint Anne knew anything about what was going on now, they would be shocked. But that is change. It's just like carnival. You know, if we talk about carnival, carnival um, was in Dominica a very important French religious festival. So you would have those 2 days before Lent when you know that when Lent comes, Ash Wednesday comes, it's 40 days of deep religion and fasting, and you must give up everything. And in those early days, when it came to Lent, you just didn't have a dance. Nobody would go and have a dance in Lent. No fete, nothing. You would be very deeply religious and serious for the whole of Lent. Then you would have a little action on Easter Sunday, Easter Monday. But certainly in those days, in the, let's say, the masquerade carnival days, things would really stop on midnight or even before 6 p.m. on the day before Ash Wednesday. And of course, you would have your names given to various days like Samedi Gras. Samedi Gras was the Saturday before Carnival. That's when a lot of the dances would take place. And Dimanche Gras was another one. So that's the Carnival. And the Carnival went through the same process as the village feast because the chanté mass, the songs on the road that were created around the Lapu Cabuit, if we're dealing with Roseau in places like Newtown and Lord Bob, Ballahutong, which is now called Pottersville, they were there preparing their songs in the weeks before. They would be going around the streets, basically practicing, and people waiting for the Juve on the Monday.
Yeah.
But that was all Lapo Cabuit and instruments and maybe some brass as well. So we see that just like the feast, going from the beginning, from even earlier in the 19th century, going right
Mm.
through the early 20th century, we're reaching the 1950s. And then by the 60s, you're getting your steel bands. And then the steel bands also tie in with the calypso, another adaptation from Trinidad. So we have the Junior Chamber of Commerce, the JCs, which then began running Carnival, having a Calypso Monarch show, usually at the Carib Cinema where Prevo Mall is now.
Now,
That's
let
where
me
they
ask you.
started off. So I often say the Chante Mass died at the steps of the Carib Cinema because everybody was moving into Calypso. And
Mm.
the Chante Mass, if they did sing it at all, it would be something from the past, like Ajay William O from 1927, Solomon Woolley from 1922, and some of those older songs from the 1930s and 40s. But from the 1960s, when the JCs took over and organized these calypso shows, the whole music changed and you
Now,
were into it. You know what was also happening is radios were coming. Huh?
let me ask you.
You were saying
In terms,
something?
yes, in terms of village feasts, though, have you found, based on your research, have you found what have you found, sorry, to be the most enduring symbols or traditions associated with village feasts? And how do they, I would say, reflect Dominica's colonial and post colonial identity?
Well, I've been trying to explain that for the last 45 minutes. But
Mhm.
essentially, what you're saying, if you're asking me for the most enduring, it's
Yeah,
not the
most enduring.
biggest, but the thing that has lasted from the last 200 years is the religious aspect of the feast.
Hmm.
So that is the church service, in some cases, a procession, particularly for the Feast of St. Peter. And of course, in the case of St. Isidore, the patron saint of farmers and laborers, and so you would have things like the procession with food, which would be presented at the altar, and then it would be handed over to the poor, to the infirmary, or whatever. So these things are essentially the longest lasting of all. And then,
Nice.
in terms of the social aspects of change, then that is something that's starting from the 1960s, 50s, going on. Um, that is the big music and the focus on fete rather than the religious. Um, so, because you must understand that in those early days, there was a deep religious conviction that if you were a farmer, if you are a fisherman, even I have come across the feast of St. Talifer, and that is the feast for women who are seamstresses, people who are making clothes. And
Wow.
I have an old photograph of these women in Roseau with their scissors hanging from their belts, and they're in their best dresses because they are making dresses. And
Mm.
it's the patron saint of seamstresses. And it's to bless them in their work and their creativity for the future. Well, that died long ago. Nobody has a feast of
Nobody,
St.
I've never seen that.
Talifer anymore, right? No,
Yeah.
no. The only place I've ever seen it is in an old photograph, right? Um, and that is, but they had feasts for cake makers and bakers, and of course Saint Joseph, patron saint of carpenters. So you would have feasts related to carpentry, the people, the skilled people of the day.
But would
So
you
so that
say, would,
essentially.
would yeah, but would you say, Dr. Honeychurch, that the village feasts played a role in preserving local heritage? I mean, you've mentioned the change, which is so very conspicuous, the evolution of the feast over the years in terms of social values and so on, and the spiritual aspect to some extent. But has the village feast played a role in preserving our local heritage, especially in the face of this modernization, as you put it?
Well, yes, I mean the religious aspect and to a certain extent the cultural aspect, because let us understand that when these feasts came, the people would be wearing their best wear, traditional wear. Their wobdwiet, their jeep. The men would be in many cases, in jackets. I've seen them. In the case of Calibishi, you had a model fishing boat, which was made by a boat builder. Because remember now, you're not only celebrating the fishermen, but the people who fished also made boats. So all of that was tied up in it. You had people who made the what they call the botte santoire, the botte which was under sail. So you had these boats being made in the villages. So all the people associated. So that was maintaining an aspect of our heritage which has gone. Nowadays, if you're a fisherman, you really would more or less buy an imported Japanese fiberglass a boat, although a few people still do make some boats. And of course, the outboard engine has taken over from the sail. So, but what I'm saying is that it does maintain the culture to a certain extent, you know, because anything associated with the feast, whether it's the farmers, the fishermen, the carpenters in the days when people celebrated a lot the Feast of St. Joseph, these things would encourage the upholding of these festivals. And
Fantastic.
the upholding of the skills that you were talking about, the
Yeah.
heritage, right?
Yeah.
Now it is fed and making money and getting sponsorship, and all of that is tied up in it. So it has evolved into something completely different from what it began with the quiet religious observances, you know?
On that note, as we wind up, as a historian, how important do you believe it is for future generations now to, in fact, understand and or continue the tradition of village feasts, and what might be lost if those traditions fade?
Well, it the thing is, you can't stop things. There's the flow of human history and human heritage that in many cases you cannot stop. It just moves into something new. So the focus that we can hang on to now is the cultural aspect related to the pride in the village. So whether you're not necessarily celebrating St. Peter or St. Paul or St. Teresa anymore, but you will hear, that is Fete Bawi, Salisbury now they call it, Bawi or Collyho or whatever. So people who are associated with Collyho or know people associated with Collyho or Calibishi or wherever, they will say, oh, this is the fete for that community. And therefore, we will go and visit and we will enjoy and participate in the events because we have a link, whether it is with Grand Bay, for instance. You will see anybody associated with Grand Bay or wants to follow Grand Bay culture, they will go to Grand Bay for Fete Saint Isidore. They're not necessarily praying for the patron saint of farmers to bless them or whatever, but it's the Grand Bay culture that's coming to the fore. So that's the aspect where you will find it moving into a new phase, because when you are a member of the village council, for instance, let's say in Good Hope, you have got to go around and ensure for your popularity and for your future election, even a PAL rep has to go and make sure that that feast is well provided for, that you're going to have enough drinks, you're going to have food, you're going to have all the bon temps that you can have by providing sponsorship or encouraging participation and publicity, and you must be seen at the feast. I mean, if you are a PAL rep or you are in the opposition and you want to become a PAL rep, you have to be there, whether in the church or in the fete. So you see, it basically then, and it's very unusual. The only other place I would say that maybe has it is in the French islands of Guadeloupe, Martinique, and St. Lucia. You will call it a fête patronale, the patron, the feast of the patron. But really, the fête patronale is also the feast of anybody associated with those villages. People want their roots. They say, my grandmother comes from La Plaine, or my family is originated from Dublin. So I will make sure I'm going to Dublin. I'll meet all my Dublin people. We'll fete, we'll enjoy ourselves together. So you see, it's moved out of the religious and it then becomes a feast of the community to join up together again, and to meet each other and see each other and be seen. So that's another aspect of it. And I think that is where it
Yeah.
will go into the future,
Dr. Lennox
because it will
Honeychurch.
become
Yes,
already
please go ahead.
commercial. So it will just continue in that way.
Yes, Dr. Lennox
So that's
Honeychurch.
it, really, to sum it
Thank
all
you.
up.
Yeah, thank you, and of course, this has been so informative, and I did learn a lot, and I've been getting a lot of messages of persons sharing that sentiment. So many feasts, and the actual spiritual relevance of them, and you explaining that evolution so comprehensively. But Dr.
Well, I'm
Honeychurch,
glad you're getting response
yeah,
online.
already, already.
Yeah.
But your closing remarks as we wind up for our next guest.
Well, my closing remarks simply are whether you're talking about carnival, whether you're talking about a musical genre, whether you're moving from, car dance into bouillon,
Mm,
calypso from the Ashanti Mass, it's a human process. It
yeah.
changes. And yes, you can hang on to some elements of the past, but a new generation will always look at it in the new form. Um, uh, in Carnival, we see it very, very marked, the way Bouillon has taken over from the Calypso. So you have these expensive Calypso shows, you have prizes for Calypsonians, but then on the street on the Monday and Tuesday, you may not hear Calypso. You'll probably hear Bouillon that never had a competition. So you got all of these very interesting things taking place, but it shows the vibrancy of the communities, and it also shows the Dominican love for camaraderie. So
Mm,
you I don't think you've the Barbados is trying to recreate it by force almost. They call it we gathering, and
ah,
it is not based on history, but they say, okay, up in St. Thomas, we gathering. So everybody will go up to St. Thomas or St. George or St. John, and they're trying to create it, but Dominica has had it for centuries,
well,
in its own traditions.
yeah.
So it's an interesting change and mood. So I
I
will
mean,
leave you there with those thoughts and that
I mean,
background.
let me just say, I will be engaging you again as long as the opportunity arises. I will be
Oh
reaching out to
Lord,
you.
you're giving me more work. I'm getting
More
old,
work, man.
you
More work for you, man.
know. All right.
We
Well,
appreciate you.
once I
We
have life,
appreciate you. We
okay.
appreciate the work that you have done and what you're doing. Very much so.
All right. Good. Well, thank you very much, and you have a good afternoon.
You as well. Blessings to you and the family, and thank you, thank you, thank you.
Righto then. Bye for now. Good.
That was historian Dr. Lennox Honeychurch. Fantastic presentation. But as you might have surmised, we're not yet done. My next guest is preparing himself. He'll be ready in a few seconds. Wow. Let's just sneak in one call. Caller, you're live.
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, caller.
I'm glad I would like even want to see him too. Because sometimes people tell me it seems I want to do like on the church. When I give out history of things, they said you are learn of Sunny church too. I understood all what he was saying and the changes of things. As I tell people, the world is not changing; it's the systems that are changing. And if look at Peter and all the apostles and them, they were fishermen. But when Christ called them out, he didn't tell them to go and go back and do what and show people what to do these things. He said, come, follow me, and you should be fishers of men. But most of the two, uh, I respect him as a man, a great man. I mean, respect people, but there are things I will not agree to it. It is that when people, these things happen, you call that tradition. And even the Bible tells us we do not have to go back into tradition. This was man-made things. Most of the things that he speak about, Saint Peter, Saint this and that, I met those things. They are man-made things that man created. But when the light comes to Jesus Christ, when the word, the Bible starts to come out, they come to the reality where that was not like that. This is the way they ought to be, the word of God. You understand? And the man started to move from religion because Martin Luther is the same thing. When he
Well,
got to know the truth.
well,
That's
we
how.
we're not
No,
disputing what it
I'm just
is.
saying. I'm just saying.
Yeah,
I'm
we're just
okay.
going into the
I
reality
know.
of it.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is that things will change because the light has come and people are coming to know the truth of what happened there. But all this boom, 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 and the band there, should not be. You understand? And these things, when Easter, these things, you have no Easter, no Pentecost, nothing at all. People have gone back to the world and doing the things of the world. You understand? But the real thing is to know Christ as your personal Savior, repent and be baptized. That is the real thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. All right, so we're talking Dominica's village feasts. We had a very nice layout of the history of Dominica's village feasts. From our very own Dr. Lennox Honeychurch, distinguished man of the soil. My guest, of course, the next guest I have here is another distinguished man of the soil. An author, legal luminary, currently based in Canada, Dominican born, Justice Dr. Irvin Andre. Good afternoon, Dr. Andre, and thank you.
Good afternoon to you, my friend, and good afternoon to your listeners. And today is the day the Lord has made. We have to be glad and we must rejoice, irrespective
Amen.
of our personal circumstances.
Amen. Let me just thank you as well for joining us. And you look like you had a delicious lunch there. Just
You're certainly correct. I wouldn't tell you the name of the dish, but suffice it to say, it proudly includes two letters B and N, but I will not disclose any further.
fantastic, Dr. Andre. In his usual humorous style. Again, thank you so much for taking the time and contributing to this very important discussion. Dr. Andre, at this time, I'd like to focus with you on, we're still on village feasts, but the cultural importance. In fact, my first question, from your perspective, as both a legal scholar, among other things, I would dare say, a cultural commentator. What do village feasts reveal, right, about the values and identity of our society?
Well, bear in mind that the genesis of village feasts, first of all, most of these feasts or the tradition of these feasts had a kind of religious underpinning.
Yeah.
They were meant to celebrate the rituals and belief systems of the predominant church, the Roman Catholic Church. But we have to be realistic. They served a social function because in immersing itself in those belief systems and values, it played a controlling role of ensuring that the population maintain a certain degree of loyalty and in many respects docility to colonial rule. The church, well, the Anglican Church anyway, and after the Roman Catholic Church, they were very important arms of colonialism. They ensured that any rebellious propensities the population, the black population, I should say, had, were diluted on the altar of docility.
Mm.
And in many respects, that is the history, or that is the genesis of the history of village feasts in Dominica. I can indicate to you that in contrast, the carnival or the celebration of carnival going back to the late 19th century posed an existential threat to colonial authority. Whether in the late 1890s, whether in 1927, whether in 1957, whether in 1963. The fact of the matter is, when violence erupted, the colonial authorities dealt very decisively with any indications of rebellion among the local population. La Plaine in on or about 1873, and then in 1957, and in other villages in Dominica, quite frankly, many people felt very restless, very uneasy, very angry about the fact that their rights were limited, their rights as we know it now, and that sense of rebellion was expressed oftentimes during the carnival celebration. So we have to look at both as two sides of the same coin. Religious festivities manifested in village feasts, carnival, in many respects, manifested, or carnival, which represented the urge to rebel against certain things. In La Plaine in 1873, it was rebellion against having to pay taxes without being able to vote in terms of representation.
Yeah.
Bear in mind, in the early 20th century, there was a strong fight against Crown colony government, where the Dominican population played very little role in terms of their governance. In 1925, there was a semblance of self-government given. In 1932, there was a famous the Dominica Conference, where the Dominican elites, people like Cecil C.E.A. Roll, a brilliant lawyer, J.B. Charles, Ralph Nichols, and others, they held this conference, attended by many of the legal luminary, not legal, the popular politicians of the day. Captain Cipriani of Trinidad, Marisho from Grenada, and they sought to have a West Indies Federation. And I believe some of our politicians these days are talking about some form of West Indies Federation. But it is a foundation which they fought, or they thought to set up, based on limited adult suffrage. In other words, Mr. Farrell, unless somebody had as much land as you, they could not participate in the voting process. So when we look at the evolution of village feasting, we cannot ignore the social dimension of our celebrations. And when we think about village feasting in its most modern forms, we cannot think about it without addressing the changes wrought by a premier called Edward Oliver LeBlanc. Edward Oliver LeBlanc, as you know, rose to ascendancy on about 1957.
Yeah.
And bear in mind that when he triumphed on about 1961, one of his central planks was, quite frankly, to resuscitate village life and to empower people. So we cannot look at feasting in its modern forms without empowerment. And we cannot look at village feasting as it was manifested in the 60s without looking at the other planks of Edward LeBlanc's strategy: boosting banana production, boosting village governance, boosting educational opportunities for children of poor villagers, boosting indigenous culture with village feasts, as we are talking about right now. In other words, engendering a sense of belonging, engendering a sense of self-worth among persons who were often looked at in a very, well, denigratory fashion by those who resided in Dominica's capital. So the whole question of village feasts, it has been transformed to a significant degree from its emphasis on religious, although these festivities still maintain their religious names: Saint Anne, Feast of Isidore, and you name whatever it is, and so on. And unfortunately, many of these feasts today have been commercialized, have been politicized. And today, in many villages, the village council no longer serves the purpose it was designed to serve. On the contrary, it has been bypassed, it has been sidelined, and it does not play the part of empowerment that it used to play in the 1960s, for example.
Can you take 2 minutes, Dr. Andre, just to expound on that?
Oh, absolutely. The village council was meant to give each village in Dominica an opportunity to govern itself, to take care of local issues.
Mhm.
Now, there's a saying in politics, all politics is local. So that it played a role, and the government recognized that role it played in terms of, even in terms of bringing potable water, even in terms of sensitizing the central government to the issues of the particular village.
Mhm.
That was the purpose of establishing village councils throughout the island. And it worked for some time in the 1960s and to a significant degree even in the 1970s. But certainly over the last 25 years, it has lost its salience or significance. On the contrary, when there is money to be given to an entity to take care of some local issues in a village, very seldom is it given to the village. But not only that, even where you have the triumph of certain villages with certain political affiliations, they are sidelined. Now, Mr. Farrell, don't take it from me. Ask somebody called Mayor Sanford. Is it Mayor Sanford or the head of the Kalinago chief?
Kalinago chief. Yeah.
Find out from her to what extent does she play that type of vibrant role envisioned by Edward Oliver LeBlanc when he instituted this system of village councils to empower people. And it's not just in the Kalinago territory, it's all over Dominica. So that we have, quite frankly, we have encroached and we have sidelined the role of the traditional role of village councils throughout Dominica. We
Doc,
have,
Doc, let me ask you, not to interject too soon, but let me ask you, as it relates to the village feasts, do you think it has helped to build and sustain social cohesion,
historic,
particularly in the rural communities across our country?
historically, it has played a wonderful role. But my thesis is very simple.
Mm.
That role has been diminished
Wow.
for political reasons. Don't take it from me, my friend. You can go ask around. The fact of the matter is that even persons who are elected to village councils,
Mm.
if they don't have a certain type of political affiliation, they're sidelined, they're trivialized, as in other areas of life in Dominica. So that by doing so, you rob the village of the type of vibrancy that otherwise it would have. You rob the villages of the opportunity to play a central and meaningful role in the development of their community.
I see.
And this is, well, let me just say, this is part of the problem which is afflicting Dominica as we speak. You know, our traditional values, our traditional institutions, to a significant degree, unfortunately, have been affected in a very negative fashion. And the question is, do we stand aside and look? As every institution of governance, the village councils, even village feasts, which played a central role, not just Siwo or Roro or Bawo or whatever the hell you call it, but a meaningful role in the community. Let me ask you this, you know better than I. From your perspective, based on your own observations, based on the anecdotal evidence,
Mm.
today, 2025 or this year, do village feasts as we've known them, then again, you're a little on the young side, do they play the unifying role they used to play in decades gone by? Yes or no, Mr. Farrell?
Based on the history, as you said, I haven't lived it that long, but based on the history and what I'm seeing now, there's a shift.
And
Sure.
that is the problem. And typically, historically, when we get a shift, we would like the shift to be a positive shift.
Yeah.
We would like to shift to empower. Take, for instance, the village feast. Yes, typically on many of these feasts, there's a church service, which is nice. In my day, we used to say Dominus Bobis cum ecum spiritutum. Now, don't ask me what the meaning of it, but it means something. Now, everything has been modernized, which is a good thing. But the question is this, based on persons who call to the radio about some of these activities and so on, the emphasis typically is on drinking. The emphasis is on a kind of reckless disregard for the communal norms. And with drinking and abandoning, what does it come with? Violence. It comes with abuse. It comes with gendered violence. It
Mm.
comes with other forms of violence. It comes with well, what should I say? The resort to certain types of activities that are either immoral or illegal, which is not to suggest that some of that didn't exist in the past. But I'm saying that today there's a greater emphasis on these activities which are antithetical, which are contrary to community building.
Mm.
And the question is to what extent, or what do we do as a community to
Mhm.
change this sorry scheme of things entire? That's how I see it. Many people wouldn't agree. Many people will say, no, no, no. Oh, these feasts today, they are wonderful. They're community building. They don't do any harm. But the evidence is there. What do we do about it, Mr. Farrell?
That's a strong question. That's a salient question there. But moving forward, given your work in documenting Dominican history and culture, how would you currently assess the role of village feasts in passing down traditions and communal memory across this generation?
Well, I'm an internal optimist. I think there are persons as we speak, without fanfare, without much publicity, who are making a scrupulous effort to document, who was making a scrupulous effort to continue these community building traditions, quite frankly,
Yeah,
making a scrupulous effort to get our young people more cognizant of the positive aspects of feasting, those aspects which engender togetherness, those aspects which engender production. I mean, growing up in Portsmouth, in the 60s,
yeah,
before my family moved to Roseau and so on. I mean, every second Thursday, you have trucks descending on the town like an invading army. You have shops bustling with activity.
yeah,
You have vendors selling everything you can think of, to be quite toute sorte qualité, everything. You have persons being together, in whether it's Vecas or all these villages from Marigat right down. You have each of them having their own little get together, so to speak. There was a much greater sense of community. The village feast typically provided an avenue for a resuscitation or a continuation of our oral traditions, of our music traditions, for God's sakes. There
yeah,
used to be healthy competition, and there still is, I must confess, of the indigenous music in certain communities and so on. In 1963, if my memory serves me correct, an American company, I can't remember its name, visited Dominica and some of the other islands and recorded some of our rich indigenous culture. And the question is, to what extent have we continued that tradition of recording our indigenous music, which we have to recognize has a value of its own. That is the heirlooms that we should be passing along with the property and the money and so on. The sense of belonging, the sense of tradition, the sense of wealth. You see, as a community, we value wealth, not in terms of your values, Mr. Farrell, not in terms of what you bring to the table,
mm,
not in terms of the extent to which you help your brother in distress, but in terms of the nice vehicle that you drive. And I know it's a nice vehicle, don't get me wrong. The
mm,
nice clothes that you wear.
mm,
That is on what we place the value on. But we don't value as much persons who are engaged in adding value to our value system to make Dominica a much better place, not just for
yeah,
ourselves, but for those who are coming. And that is important because every day on radio, you hear about the brain drain. You hear about the young people uh, fleeing the market, fleeing the island, if I may say so. And in a sense, you can't blame them because the question is, if they don't believe that what's there is something worthwhile, something to be cherished, then how can we blame them from leaving? I'm probably the last person to complain. I didn't flee Dominica, but I went away to take advantage of educational opportunities. But I did so because I couldn't get those opportunities in Dominica. And the fact of the matter is, when I initially applied for a scholarship in Dominica, I didn't get it. So I got out of Dodge because staying and doing nothing was not an option. But guess what? There seems to be a reverse migration going on as we speak. Dominicans abroad, many of them, quite frankly, while as a result of being abroad, they have learned to place a much higher and greater value on their indigenous culture, on the island they left behind, which, although changed, is still very attractive, particularly at a time when throughout Europe and throughout America, there seemed to be a counter revolution which is debasing the value of the human person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hmm? People are fleeing because, quite frankly, many persons are saying, no, America is no longer the country that I crave to be in. You
Mm-hmm.
have professionals fleeing in America, going to the going to Canada, going to England, going to Europe, and so on.
Yeah.
Because it's not just a matter of the job you do, it's a matter of the quality of life. It's a matter of what you value. Because what does it profit you if you gain this wonderful job paying you hundreds of thousands of dollars, if unexpectedly your home is invaded, family members killed, vehicles stolen, and you have to live in that same community, not being able to trust anyone. So inevitably, with all this fracas out there, people are rediscovering the value of life. And that is why Dominica is even more attractive now. That is why the values which underline the village feast are even more important now.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, as I said, thankfully and fortunately, there has been a movement to embrace what is intrinsically valuable as opposed to the trappings of wealth or the trappings of success.
You know,
No
Dr.
one
Andre,
person,
you
yeah.
you just tapped into my next question. I was about to ask you in relation
Okay.
to that relationship with the diaspora and the village feasts at home in terms of that type of celebration resonating with our Dominicans living abroad. I was about to ask you if you're seeing that.
But of course, I mean, just a few weeks ago, you may have heard advertisements about a Dominican chap from Scots Head, for example. That's just one example.
Yeah,
Organizing a huge village get together. Bacchanalians to Castlewood, a huge village get together involving residents abroad of Scots Head to come home and celebrate and to unite and to engage in community building activities.
yeah,
And you have many such village reunions, whether of Wesley, oh Jesus wept, I'm sorry, whether of Acaz, of Portsmouth, and so on. You have many of these activities taking place, and in my view, on a more frequent scale than they used to, because they have a perspective, well, they have an ability to see some of these things or to recognize some of these things, which otherwise they have taken for granted. They recognize that there is a community of spirit in Dominica, which, although faded, is significantly greater than what exists abroad. And that is why it is so imperative. But it is not just a matter of cultural importance. There's a financial aspect to all this.
hmm
Many people, including Dr. Fontaine, have spoken about the contributions, the financial contributions of Dominicans brought to Dominica, the barrel economy.
yeah.
And let's face it, when you have your Creole festival, the biggest share of the gate receipts, or a significant portion of the gate receipts, come from where? Dominicans returning.
That's correct.
Guadeloupe, whether from Guadeloupe or Martinique, whether from neighboring islands or from other countries. And it's the
Mhm.
same thing around Carnival. And I'll tell you, whether it's Israel, and I don't want to get into this war with Gaza thing, that's another story
That's
entirely.
another, yeah, yeah.
Whether it's Jamaica, Jamaica in the Caribbean has done a fantastic job of welcoming their brothers who reside abroad and encouraging them or enticing them to make significant contributions to the island. And Jamaicans, irrespective of what you and I may say about them, quite frankly, they're never so proud as when they're talking about the music, when they're talking about the athletes, when they're talking about their scholars who've made such significant contributions, whether in England, but certainly in the United States and Canada. They're never so proud to embrace that heritage. They're never so proud to have feasts within their adopted lands celebrating their heritage.
Dr. Andre, my next question, my follow-up question, this is a tough one. But in your opinion, how can Dominica, based on your observations, and we heard Dr. Honeychurch as well prior to your presentation, in your opinion, how can Dominica balance preserving the cultural authenticity of village feasts while in fact allowing for this modern expression and innovation within that type of event?
Yes, but innovation does not mean getting rid of what went on before. You don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. You try to achieve a delicate balance between change and continuity. Speaking of continuity, Mr. Farrell, you're a man of great wisdom. Let me ask you one question. Do you believe that having an influx of foreigners, whether Chinese, whether from Russia, whether from Dubai, do you think that that is a move which will foster and develop Dominican culture? Yes or no?
Without strategic planning, no.
Okay, because you had a guest some days ago, and the point he was making is Dominicans need more people, so we should have no concerns. How naive! How short-sighted! That was an expression of self-interest. You have to be peddling passports to believe that it matters not if Dominicans, well, if persons who have Dominican passports can simply participate and can simply direct and control the trajectory of Dominica's history. Do you think you could do that in China, Mr. Farrell? You're a man of great wisdom. Do you think you can do that, sir?
In
People like us.
China, in China, for all ethnicity,
That's right. I
that's a
don't.
no. That's
You
a
don't have to.
100%
You don't
no.
have to answer. But the point is this. The point is this, and you know the answer. The point is this. There are certain steps we have to take to ensure the legacy, our tradition, our heritage. Taking those steps, quite frankly, does not necessarily mean that we are anti-foreigner or we anti this, because every country, to a certain extent, guards its treasure. Not the gold buried under the ground, not the jet, as we learned when we were growing up. There's a jet in somebody's backyard with all types of gold. But those things that we typically overlook, the value system we all too often overlook. Our musical traditions, our cultural traditions, our
Yeah.
dancing traditions. Now, Mr. Farrell, someone once told me that you were the Basie Bear champion of your village. I can't confirm it, but those values
Yeah.
have to be preserved. Unless, of course, we have an innate inferiority complex that we believe that, you see, we have to move away. I can tell you this, as I said, I was the product of two different worlds. My
Yeah.
father's world, growing up in Portsmouth, with the traditions of education and some privilege. My mother's world of acres of Penville, going into the bush with my grandfather with a cutter on his back, and I have a cutlass in case any eyeball run across my path. Maintaining those traditions, going to the village rum shop and so on, seeing people dance, seeing the little bands, cultural bands and so on. I can appreciate that, although I was young at the time.
Yeah.
But there was a richness. There was a richness.
Yeah.
There was an innocence, to be quite frank with you. Although,
Yeah.
as I
Yeah.
said, people drank, consumed alcohol, and so on and so forth. But again, there was a greater togetherness, a togetherness that was not, unfortunately, severed by political tribalism. And we have to move away from that. If we continue on that road, we do so to our peril. But I have hope because there are signs of resuscitation. There are signs of cultural resistance because there are many persons I know, whether in Dominica or abroad, quite frankly, are doing wonderful things in terms of the preservation of Dominica's cultural heritage.
Dr. Andre, fantastic.
Thank
To
you
all
for
our
inviting
listeners,
me. Thank you
yes.
for recognizing the call.
This guy is amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Irvin Andre, 100% Dominican, giving his professional perspective on the cultural importance of village feasts. Dr. Andre, your closing remarks as we introduce our next guest.
Well, first of all, let me thank you for inviting me to speak about this topic, which to many persons may be taboo. Let me thank those who've taken the time to listen. And let us hope that at least we continue to be sensitized by issues that affect us daily, by issues that affect our children, that issues which will determine to what extent do our people return and make a contribution. Unfortunately, in this world of today, one doesn't even have to be there on the ground physically because everything these days is virtual this, virtual that, and so on. So there's always hope. And I personally think that there is significant hope because you may not be able to see it in a grocery store, but you see it elsewhere in many people who are doing their best to be their best. And that is what we need, our people to be their best because they can achieve their best. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Dr. Andre.
Thank you, Mr. Kern. Thank you.
Excellent presentations from an engagement from Dr. Lennox Honeychurch and now Dr. Irvin Andre. Good afternoon to Glenda and John. Good afternoon. Let's take a quick break. We'll be back with our next guest right after this. We are in hurricane season. Stock up on food which has a long shelf life. Sterilize baths, all containers, and cooking utensils to store water. If in doubt, drink boiled or treated water only. Keep flashlights, candles, and storm lanterns handy, along with batteries and matches. Store all garden implements and furniture inside if possible. A message from Q95 FM Radio.
What's the trick? When you spread up in pots, flying, falling, infection, falling when you spread up in pots. Nothing comes off the box. The Caribbean brand of the box, the number one brand. If I sing it live, nothing comes off the box. When you move up, you take your way. Pull out your pop and give them a spring. When you want insects in the floor, nothing comes close to the box.
There's Smooth.
And then there's Guinness Smooth.
It's a brand new cool.
Incredibly smooth.
Perfectly balanced.
For a smooth and refreshing taste.
How smooth? Well smooth. Guinness Smooth.
For a smooth and refreshing taste. New Guinness Smooth. Must be 18 years or older. Drink responsibly. Socialize responsibly.
Locally distributed by Belfast Estate Limited.
If you know your favorite store, dial it now. 612-1253. That's Mega. You can rely on Mega for some real deals on name brand clothing and electronics. High quality, low price. We are a wholesale and retail store located in Calabishi, right on the main road. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram as Mega Deals Dominica. Like our page. Check out our stuff. Call us. Visit us. Would appreciate that. Come try it on. Love it. Buy it at Mega Deals. Your one and only online and brick and mortar store. Mega Deals is also on wheels. We make it convenient for your shopping. We deliver straight to your door. Email us at info@megadealsda.com. Rely on Megadeals for some real deals.
Super Six jackpot is now over $400,000. You have to be in it to win it. Get your tickets today.
Dominica, we're back. I told you it would be another full program. We all heard the excellent presentation done by Dr. Lennox Honeychurch, after which we heard from legal luminary Dr. Irvin Andre. On the line with me is a man who clearly needs no introduction, but we'll give him one anyway. Distinguished man of the soil, a spiritual leader, Catholic priest. Ladies and gentlemen, on our next segment of the program, I'd like to present to you Father Herman Sharpless. Good afternoon, Father Sharpless. How are you?
Good afternoon, Mr. Farrell. How are you?
I'm doing good, thanks God. Happy you could make it.
Yes, for sure. I'm doing quite well myself.
Again, welcome to the program. We're talking Dominica's Village Feasts. We looked at the history. We also looked at the cultural relevance of the feast. But now, I'd like you to take us on the spiritual side, the spiritual essence, if you will, of the village feasts in Dominica. Father Sharpless, could you explain the spiritual foundation of village feasts and why they hold such a central place in the Catholic tradition?
Thanks for inviting me, and of course, I really enjoyed hearing both Lennox and Andre. I think they were very well researched, very knowledgeable guys on the subject. Village feast and the Catholic Church. I mean, if you speak of village feast, you cannot speak of village feast without speaking about the Catholic Church. It's tradition, the culture, everything is intertwined. In the context of the Catholic Church, the whole idea of village feast comes from what the Church referred to as saints. That saints are individuals recognized by the Church for their exceptional holiness and are seen as models of Christian living and intercessors with God on behalf of the faithful. So I really need to emphasize that whole idea of the model of Christian living. Patron saints are specific saints chosen as protectors and intercessors for particular places, groups, or causes. And in the context of the church, they are particularly chosen as patrons of churches and chapels. So these churches are often dedicated to the saint, signifying their role as a spiritual guide and protector for that community or for that church community. And the saints' relics may be placed in the church's altar to further emphasize the intercessory role. So the whole idea of having a saint dedicated to that particular church is very significant. The fact that they are role models and intercessors on behalf of that church community. So that throughout Dominica, where you have churches and chapel built, they carry a particular saint that has been identified as the patron of that particular church community. So that for every one of those saints, there are particular days on the church's calendar where they are celebrated. So, for example, on the 29th of June, we had the Feast of St. Peter and Paul, very popular, very well known, especially in fishing communities. However, the two churches that I know who are dedicated to the saints are Koliho and Kalibishi. The churches are named after the patron saints.
Mm.
Saints are seen as examples of how to live a Christian life, demonstrating their heroic virtue and faithfulness. So the whole idea is they are put forward to us as model of Christian living. They are there to show us, especially the people in a particular community, the particular chapel or church community, how they made it as Christians, what are the challenges and what have and how they remain spiritually focused throughout their lives. So that as part of celebrating those feasts, um, normally you would have what they refer to as either a triduum, either 3 days, or a novena, which is 9 days, and particular prayers are being said during that period of time, and the life of that particular saint is explained and put forward to the parishioners for as a model of Christian living. Also, they are there and they are seen as intercessors. Catholics believe that saints being they are there in heaven and they can pray to God for us on our behalf. Now that is significant as well because throughout this novena prayers, the intercession of these saints are evoked, are seeked by parishioners or by the faithful throughout either the novena or the triduum. And as I said, that is meant to really emphasize the day that they must be seen for who they are, role model of Christian living. Now, on the celebration of that particular saint on that particular day, there is usually a very festive celebration of the Eucharist. Normally, the Mass would be either between 8, 9, 10, it depends on what time it is celebrated. And then, of course, going back to our culture, people came out on that day. That was the day the community came, they moved as a village, as a parish, and they would come to celebrate that feast. They would come to celebrate that saint. And at the end of the Mass, there was usually a very powerful social aspect attached to that celebration. And that's where the culture and the dance and you name it. And I like what Irving said, that when Libna tried to intertwine that into the village life. So even for me growing up as a young boy in Vegas, I remember the days when St. Peter's was celebrating. For Vegas, the feast is St. Andrew's. And St. Andrew's is usually the 30th of November. And when that day came, the whole neighboring communities forming that parish would descend in Vegas, and it was an entire day of festivity. After Mass, you had ballet dance right under the mango, and the men would visit the village shops. And it was just a moment for people to find a way to socialize and to celebrate their togetherness. It really fostered a strong communal spirit, and it fostered the ability for people to not only celebrate the feast, but to celebrate their togetherness.
Well, on that note, not to cut you off, my follow up question, Father Sharpless. Over the years, some say, and I mean, you heard Dr. Honeychurch, you heard Dr. Andre, some of the sentiments I can tell you, even off air, were supported. Persons like Rossi and Mr. Alvin supported those statements that some persons are saying the religious aspect of village feasts have been a bit overshadowed, Father, by secular activities. How do you see the church responding to this particular shift? And is there a need to recenter the focus?
I think that has been a major concern for the church over a number of years. I remember a few years back, some of the parishes kind of shifted and celebrating the feast on the day that actually fell. So if it fell on a Wednesday or Friday, they would have the celebration of the Eucharist on that day for the feast. But the I think both what Lennox and Andre said, the whole social and political environment is what makes it very difficult, because the funding that have gone into promoting that the CO social aspect of the feast have totally override the spiritual aspect, and therefore it's going to be a battle to fight that kind of movement. Um, the church will continue to celebrate this feast, but I'll tell you, even when you have Heritage Day, the church celebration in the morning, compare the attendance to that of the afternoon, it's like chalk and cheese. That people shifted away more to the CO and what the young people refer to as the free up. That seemed to be more attractive and more entertaining to them than the spiritual aspect. Now, how do you fight that is something else, because um, you may not always even have them within your space to talk to directly. Whereas, and of course, another part of it too is that when these feast celebrations are coming, it is heavily advertised, and oftentimes what is promoted is the social aspect of it and not the spiritual. So it is not. It's not. I mean, it's not an easy thing to deal with. It's not an easy situation to face up to. But from the perspective of the church, we continue to place the focus on what the feast suppose, ought to, and should celebrate, and that is the life of the saint. Because the churches are often they are dedicated to the particular saint, signifying the saint um, is a spiritual guide and protector for the church community, and that is what we would try to emphasize. The choice of a patron saint can be based on tradition, the saint's connection to the area, or the saint's patronage of particular cause or occupation. So all of that is what the saint celebration is supposed to emphasize. And the whole social aspect of it came automatically because we're not only spiritual beings, we have to find ways and means of enjoying life, of celebrating each other, our togetherness and socializing, and all of that have to be
Yeah.
part of it. And that's why that whole social aspect of it grew as part of our culture, connected to the patronal feast of the particular community or the church. But today, it's a different reality. Even what it was meant to be then, which was the coming together of the community, the cultural celebration, the whole idea of the quadrille and the belly, all of it was part of the celebration. Today, you don't see that anymore. It's all CO. It's a CO celebration, and the CO is stronger where the money is more present. So, trust me, that is a tough one.
Have you seen, on that note, you touched a lot on the role that the patron saints play in shaping the spiritual identity of a village. So I won't go into that again, but based on your priesthood experience, have some village feast celebrations actually helped in renewing faith or fostering devotion, bringing back lapsed Catholics back to the church? Have you seen that?
Oh yes, oh yes. I know, like in especially the parishes where you have the Marian feast, like in Point Michel, where you have the Lady of La Salette, in Fatima or Lady of Fatima. These two communities, those celebrations carry with them as a very strong, very popular novena. And during the days leading up to the feast, and during the novena, people really go deep into prayer. People There's deep devotion during that time, and spiritually it nourishes people not only for the days leading to the feast but throughout their lives. So that today many people who follow these novenas have developed a very strong love and devotion to Our Lady under the title of Fatima or La Salette. So yeah, it has, and I think that's why they continue to this day. Our forefathers, the elders who are still around, they will tell you how much those feasts shaped their life, and how significant it was for them then. But today, with the shift that we have, it almost seems like that part of it is certainly not as important as it was then.
Let me ask, talking about the shift, this is driven by the younger generation. So, how important is it, Father Sharpless, for the younger generation to understand the spiritual roots of these feasts, and what can be done to encourage their meaningful participation?
I think the younger generation are faced with a major challenge. One, they tend to disconnect with the past and think that they can shape a new life for them in the future.
But that's not possible. If you don't know where you've been, you won't know where you're going.
That is exactly the problem. And so that those who have the influence and the resources, it is easier for them to put forward the modern way, the modern things that seem very much more attractive to the young people today, and they will gravitate towards those things, unlike the traditional things that people like myself and those who are older would have known. And that is where the disconnect is. How do you get them attracted to this concept, this understanding of the face? I mean, how? Let me give you an example. For example, you have, let us say, the celebration of Saint Isidore coming up, and Isidore is usually the Monday, and leading up to that, there are so many activities going on, but you're going to have a lot of these young people. They have a CO this Sunday evening, and by the time Monday comes, they cannot be present for the mass. How do they learn about this Isidore? Do they
Mm.
understand the significance and the importance of Isidore? Do they know the kind of life Isidore lived, and how he can shape our lives in the present, despite the fact that it goes right back so many years ago? But so that is how do you bring that message across to them? Because where they are and what they're attracted to, that message is not heard there. So that is the challenge. And no matter how hard one may try, it will continue to be a major challenge for us. Um, so the village feast, what we would refer to as village feast, and of course we still refer to it as the patronal feast of that particular community,
Mm.
they continue to be more secular as we speak than they were meant to be originally, which was spiritual. And if you give me a choice, I would go back to what it was then, because that truly celebrated every aspect of Christian and communal life, and it really brought people together and gave people a reason to be happy and to celebrate that great feast.
Wow. The spiritual relevance of village feasts in Dominica. We're currently engaging Father Herman Sharpless. The very profound responses. And you could tell from all the presenters we had this afternoon that are concerned as it relates to the actual purpose of the feast and its spiritual relevance is a bit overshadowed by a level of carnality. But of course, all three of my guests remain hopeful that the younger generation can finally tap into the purpose, the relevance of the feast, and carry on the values it began with. Father Sharpless, thank you so much for your presentation this afternoon. Your closing remarks.
Thanks a lot, Ms. Farrell. My closing remark is you were asking how does it influence, how it influenced people then, and I try to explain it to the best of my ability. Now,
Yeah.
my question is, with what we have today as a new dispensation of this feast, how does it positively impact the lives of these young people, and how bring more development and advancement for them and the community is something that we need to reflect on. Maybe when we see the data, then we'll realize we need to go back to where we came from.
Very profound. Ladies and gentlemen, your very own Catholic priest, Father Herman Sharpless. Father Sharpless, thank you again. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
I'm sure we'll be talking again.
Sure, yeah.
All right, have a blessed one.
Same to you.
Father Herman Sharpless. There you have it. Are we on track as it relates to our village feasts in Dominica? Are we upholding the values it is supposed to represent? Well, these questions were answered thanks to our three guests. We engaged Dr. Lennox Honeychurch, historian, Dr. Irvin Andre, author, legal luminary, Catholic priest, a community man, Father Herman Sharpless. We'll take a few calls and then we engage with our friend Jeff Bellot, one of the main organizers of the Scots Head Soufriere Reunion Committee. Let's take your calls. Caller, you're live.
Yes, Mr. Richie Farrell. I call to really congratulate you for doing a very, very good job.
Thanks,
very
God,
profound job, man. I'm very satisfied with bringing those guests and then the kind of question you pose to them. Keep it up, young man. Keep it up. Keep it up. I'm very proud of you.
Thanks, God.
Okay?
Thank you. Thank you, my friend. Caller, good afternoon. You're live. All right, please call back. Let's take this call. Caller, you're live. Please try again. 449-3095, 449-3096, 3097. Overseas line 305-432-9624. These are the numbers to call in. And caller, welcome.
Yeah, good afternoon, Mr. Farrell.
Good afternoon, my friend.
Yeah, very good topic. Yeah. I'm in total agreement with with the various speakers that came, that spoke on the subject. In that, I think I personally think the intention of the feast has actually been hijacked, And I think the feast is supposed to be, like Father said, it's supposed to be an expression of or at least to help the village to adopt and express the values and the virtues of the saints that are actually, being celebrated.
Being celebrated, yeah.
Yeah, but what you see now is that for something totally, opposite, I avoid the word I want to use, to the values and the virtues that the church actually intends to be instilled in the people.
That's right, yeah.
And for me, it's an affront. I think the church is supposed to at least do something to at least rein some of that external influence, some secular influence. It's the church's feast, so it has a certain amount of ownership of it. So I don't take control of it. You know, it's your feast. It's not from any other entity. It belongs to the church, so take control of it.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point.
I think in the ancient times, I think these feasts are passed after the feast of the biblical feast, right? Of the Israelites, right?
Mm.
And I think in my reading that I have been reading for a long time, I don't know the particular feast that the Jewish people were actually celebrating. And I think they actually put a stop to it for that very reason. It's like it went out of control. And the Jewish people and the Jewish authorities said, well, you guys are not doing a good job with this thing. It has lost its purpose, so they put a stop to it. I can remember the name of the food, but I read about it. So I think the church is well positioned to take control of the thing. Thank you.
Excellent contribution, caller. A very strong point. Some level of regulation may be required to preserve the actual purpose of the village feast. I mean, this is an integral part of our culture. We can't pretend it doesn't exist. Caller, you're live. All right, try calling back. Good afternoon, my friend. You're live.
Good afternoon, Richie. I must compliment you on your program today.
Thank you.
It's very interesting. And as long as you can, continue doing that good job you're doing.
Thank you.
I must say, you've been doing good from the time you're there. When you saw, I came as a child growing up at Portersville, that's from Roseville, Portersville, we saw St. Peter's Feast. It was the fisherman's feast. And you see, the fishermen decorate their boat with flags and, that flamboyant, we call it flamboyant, that beautiful tree that's going all pink, orange, all the botanical gardens all over the place have that. They would take it and they would decorate their boat with flags.
Wow.
From the church, the Catholic church at Portersville would be decorated nicely. They would go there to have their mass, and from there the priest would come and bless the boat. And that would be the fisherman's feast. Fisherman's feast. Who wants to come and around them could go. But now it's a different thing totally. Is my Parrep sponsoring this? Parrep sponsoring that. I think since after the emergence of the Labour Party, that is gospel truth, and a lot of people can tell you that thing become outrageous. Parrep this, Parrep that, sponsoring, and it just watering down all of these feasts that are taking place right about now. Which thank you for that very good program you had today. Right.
Thank you. Wishing you an enjoyable afternoon. I mean, the guests really did an excellent job. Father Herman Sharpless, Dr. Irvin Andre, Dr. Lennox Honeychurch, take a bow. Good afternoon, caller, you're live.
Hello, good afternoon, Richie.
Good afternoon, welcome.
I do not know you, but I'm just calling you as a senior citizen. You're doing a fantastic job, Richie. And you know what I like? You have different people coming and talk on different things. You understand, different topics. And then the people you bring on those shows, they know their onions, so they are able to educate us. You understand?
Yeah.
It's not a best, they say best. They educate us. You understand? So you listen because we do not know everything. Some people think they know everything, but we do not know everything. You know, some people,
correct,
they want to be a nurse, they're not a nurse, they can't give injection, they want to be this. You understand what I'm saying? So I love it. Keep doing that. Richie, you're doing an excellent job.
Thank God.
Thank you very much, young man.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you. And keep listening to the big station, okay? God bless. Good afternoon, caller, and welcome.
Well, welcome, man. Well, everybody didn't know about Richie. Just thinking they would just get Richie. When they want Richie to read just come and read news. But you don't know Richie's brand new shoes. You understand? So Richie, I think a boy man that is in you up. I think a boy man big in you upstairs.
Yes, brother.
The Dominicans, well, all you didn't know, Q95 is the best. And you know, from any DJ, any man is to understanding. And that man respect him. You know why I respect that man? He's doing his research. And when he come in. You understand? And that man is learning from matter. He learning from the street because he come out in all those corners. You understand? And he's doing good. Very, very good, my brother. Continue doing that. And bring the right set of people that is really talking for truth for power. Now let's go. Everybody crying about Catholic. My brother, let us go on our knees, come together, ask God for forgiveness of what we have done. What we have done to some of our family, and we have continued doing it just for politicians. Let us put our hands and our foot together. And that is how, you see, that is how Richie reached there. He put his hand and his foot and his brain together. And he's talking for all of us to be together and forever. But some of us talking on one side of our tongue, blah, blah, blah. And as our back turns, more cool wash on us. I want us to stop that. And in closing, Mr. Skerrit, I am calling on you this afternoon again. Mr. Skerrit, the block is divided. Okay? The people is divided. Sports is divided, and sports is health and culture. Mr. Skerrit, I am calling on you this afternoon. I am watching the Bayfront, and I'm watching you all planting flowers. My suggestion up to you today, Mr. Skerrit, is you give the schools, the little children that is artists, to paint anything about Dominica culture outside that flower pot there based on, and you all are going to give them a small token and a little, you know what I mean, stipend to go home to buy food for their mother. That is what I want for unity for us before the tourist scene. Because there is listen, because you doesn't listen, and if you listen as a teacher, everything will be better in the country. Bye-bye. Richie, don't let it go. Hit them with the bell. Bye-bye.
Yeah, that's my air mode. That's how I operate. I'm not an advocate for division. You won't find me doing that. Let's take a few more calls. Caller, you're live.
Reaching me again. You know something I'm thinking of? I wonder, together with Mr. G, if you all could have a program to talk on the Constitution. But you'd have to look at a certain time, you know, when all the young people can listen, you know, that type of thing. I'd really like to see, you know, somebody or persons or whoever you'll get, if it's lawyers or what, to speak about the Constitution. So they go, you know, page by page. You wouldn't finish that in a day.
No,
but you would organize. If it's a week or 2 days a week, or, you know. But you'd have to have it when young people can listen, not when people at school or, you know, everybody at work or so. It's just a thought. Thank you.
It's a good thought. One that will require resources and time, though. But it's a very good, a good thought. Caller, good afternoon and welcome.
Yes, 007, the last caller. I agree with her. I give her 100% a 1 and an A. And the one before the last caller, the lady again that called, the young lady, when she say you do a good job, right? All I say to her, amen, hallelujah. I'm together with her. You are doing a fantastic job, my brother.
Thanks, God.
Take care of yourself. And I wish you all the best. Know where you eating, know where you drinking, and take care, my brother. Long live Richie Rich. Up I got.
Why? You can't get enough of Marlene. Good afternoon, Marlene. Good afternoon. All right, so listeners, as promised, my friends, we're going to make a stop with the good folks in Scots Head and Soufriere. Let's take a break. We'll be right back.
Everywhere their country hurts. It's time we say Dominica first. We honor our nation builders on Cooperative Day, July 5th at the Intercontinental Hotel in Portsmouth. An awards celebration. The cooperative movement presents awards to our own cooperative heroes, nominated by their own cooperative society. Music, drama, star power, Michael Henderson, Calypso Monarch, Joy, and more. Entrance by invitation only. July 5th, Intercontinental Hotel in Portsmouth. From 7 p.m., the Cooperative Awards celebration. Dominica first, keeping the spirit of Kudma alive.
Our Lady of Fairhaven Cathedral presents the Jubilee Garden Party under the distinguished patronage of Her Excellency Sylvanie Burton on July 6th, 2025 from 3 to 8 p.m. on the State House grounds. The Jubilee Garden Party. Come, step into the evening of enjoyable live music and prepare to indulge in delicious food and drink. Sponsored by PDD Caribbean, Gaspar, J. Astephen and Company Limited, the Fortune Hotel, Deepex Scholar Lab, Next Connect, and the Government of Dominica. Proceeds will support the renovation efforts of the historic Our Lady of Fairhaven Cathedral and support the Feeding Jesus program. See you at the Jubilee Garden Park, July 6, 3 to 8 p.m. Tickets available at Deepex, Next Connect, and Bullseye Pharmacy. Only $200.
Dominicans, Dominicans, enjoy your property, protect your property. You homeowner and businessman, protect your property, enjoy your property. Can't wait for the hurricane, can't wait till you flood again, can't wait till you fly out and all your business coming out. Remember, no insurance company will insure your property when a storm is approaching. Get ahead of the hurricane season and insure with a company who gives you the assurance of payment for your valid claim. Come speak with us today at the New India Assurance Company Limited, upstairs AC Shillingford and Company Limited, 24 King George Street, Roseau. Bring along an up-to-date valuation from a qualified engineer and get insured today.
Ah, boy. As promised, we're speaking with Jeff Bellot, the organizer of the Scots Head, Soufriere Scots Head Reunion Committee. Jeff, welcome to the program.
Good afternoon to Richie. Good afternoon to listeners to the mighty Q95 FM. It's great to have you and to have you contact me and doing this for the Dominican public to know what's going on in Scots Head.
Fantastic. We know that you guys have been quite engaged. A lot of bustling and busyness going on down there in the south. We have Friday and a few days left. Friday, Saturday, basically this weekend. What can patrons expect?
Yeah, so, we want to thank you in a big way. First radio station come on board to partner with us to make this event very good. And even those who try to critic Squid 95 stood up before, and the listeners as well who have supported us very well. So we want to thank them in a very, very special way this afternoon. So the Scots Head Reunion continues this weekend, and we have big things going on tonight with Franklin Moses, Dominica's #1 comedian, and probably one of the best in the region. Will be live entertainment. It's something people don't want to miss. If you really want to see Franklin Moses in action, tonight is the night. And it's not just about Franklin tonight, but it's about the audience. It's going to be interacting with the audience. We also have some great talent from the South performing as well. We're going to have some people from the USDI actually. I'm going to be doing some hula hoops and all of these activities going on. It's a free event, Scots Head Talent Night, and special guest Franklin Moses. That's happening tonight in the Caribbean, right between the Caribbean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. It is going to be a great evening for families and friends to come along we're inviting everybody to Scots Head tonight for this spectacular talent in Scots Head with special guest Franklin Moses.
Yes, and so that's happening tonight. Special talent night. Franklin Moses, of course, being the featured act. What are we looking at for Saturday or Friday and Saturday?
Saturday, God's willing, we'll be having the King of Colors, Midnight Groovers, live in Scots Head for the real Corner. So what people saw on Sunday in Scots Head with Renee and Exclusive, and it was a taste of what to come. So this Saturday is the real Corner. We're talking about fish is made many different ways to be tasted, many different ways. All inclusive fish, anywhere you can find it. And it's going to be just like the old Corner where we have a band live like Midnight Groovers. I'm going to be taking you way back. And also we're going to have Dr. Miguel Labadie and Tropic DJ to supplement between intermission time. And then this Corner, why is it different? Well, you got the mighty Midnight Groovers. You're going to have games in the afternoon. You're going to have fish on the menu throughout in any different way, including Richie, a few bars. We have a special guest, Jamaican chef, will be having some special Jamaican Creole Caribbean fish on display at a bar in Scotland. So then it's going to be a tasting time to opportunity fishing. You never want to eat your opportunity to taste that. So come early because limited supply. That is happening on Saturday. And on tomorrow, God's willing, for those who are still wondering, we only have space for about 28 or 29 tickets left for the Big Gin and Dance Sufre Guest House. So tonight is the last chance to get opportunity to get tickets to support this event. And then you can contact us outside the Caribbean State. There will be 29 tickets also left for the Big Gin and Dance. And this is all to raise funds for Scots Head. This is about making the Scots Head reunion an example for the rest of Dominicans to follow, where we can stand up against people who want to control us and be independent. You know, we need to show the rest of Dominica. What we are trying to show the rest of Dominica is we cannot depend on politicians and governments to dominate our lives, that without them we cannot do nothing. And this reunion really is about setting the pace for the rest of the regions to come into Dominica, where men and women who live overseas, who live in Dominica, putting their talent together, their financial resources together, they're sacrificing their time together to make something happen for the community. We need to go back to these days where all people can go and build bus stops, or people can go and clean the community, or people can go and build schools and hospitals and homes. We have Dominicans who are capable of doing this. And in Scots Head, we believe this reunion is an example of how together, how we are stronger together, how we are working so hard together to make our community better, and that we don't have to have people to control our lives and telling us how to live our lives. We are adults, we're independent, we know what we want for community, and the choice is we open the hands out there. If you want to come on board, whether you're from the government, whether you're from the council, whether you're from any group, come on board. But we are not going to let anyone stop us from doing what is right for Scots Head, for Soufriere, for Gagnon. And this is why this reunion is different. And we want to fund people who are coming up to support us, because this is the funds we are using. We get no major financial donations from the government. We are doing that compliments with Belfast Queen and Little will help us to make this happen. And that's why this reunion is special.
Wow. So definitely a call there for persons to adopt a communal and independent mindset towards these type of events. Of course, while collaboration is still recommended, even from government, there needs to be an independent approach as it relates to the logistics and creation of these events. Jeff, your closing remarks at this time.
Again, we want people to come to Scots Head on Sunday, God's willing. The action will come to an end on Sunday, so we still have activities on Sunday where we'll be awarding those people who make significant contribution towards the development of not just Scots Head, but Dominica. People like the great Musene William John Lewis. Everyone knows people like Mr. Hazel Packett, former national Dominica cricket captain.
Yeah.
We have Tempo, Mighty Fisherman. We depend on every day to build that country with whenever event happening in Scots Head. We got Dennis Day too, which was contributed tremendously towards community development and groups. And, Miss Rosalind Vania Paul, who taught people like myself in school, and, who's still interested in education and want to continue education. And after that, we'll be having official opening of the bus stop in Scotland after 8 years, Dominica. We, the Reunion Committee, make it possible for a bus stop. Nobody was going to stop in the way of the Reunion Committee to build a bus stop for the people of Scotland. And we want to fund the Dominica National Lottery. We want to thank Petrocabri for making some funds available to make the bus stop happen. And we're not stopping here, Richie. When we open that bus stop on Sunday, God's willing, after that will be a big celebration for Big Block Aroma. And then the next project is to make sure that we get the funds we need to build bathrooms in the downtown area for the vendors and when tourists come alive. So this committee is not just for the reunion. We are going to continue to work with whoever organization or government or member of parliament that want to work with us. We want to make people come together. That's why teachers say unity. So come and join us this weekend. If you don't get your dinner tickets, come here. There's only about 12 t-shirts left. Come and get yours. We are ready for you. I hope, Dominica, you are ready to come to Scots at beginning tonight.
Excellent. As it should be, Jeff, as it should be.
Indeed.
Thank you. All right, folks, that was Jeff Bellard, the chairman of the Sophia Scots Head Reunion Committee. The South is alive from tonight. We are wishing Franklin Peter Moses all the best on his show this evening. Undoubtedly one of the best comedian entertainers in the region. Thank God that he's back and in full force. Dominicans, that's it for me on this edition of Talk on the Block. It has been a pleasure. 3:23, that's the time in the afternoon on this Thursday. As I said earlier today, we are expecting some intermittent weather from this tropical wave within the next 12-24 hours, thereabout. You may see some deterioration beginning in the weather, but stay safe and be vigilant. It's been a great program. Dominica's Village Feasts, the evolution of that, its cultural relevance, its spiritual relevance. What a program. On behalf of the entire Q95 News team, I'd like to wish you guys a pleasant afternoon. Stay tuned to the big station, Q95 FM.
Introducing the new Caribbean paint from Do It Center. Turon paint and wall covering from Do It Best quality paint, giving you the same great interior and exterior quality, the same color matching technology at an incredible price. Available in black, satin, and semi-gloss. Visit us on Google Road or call our paint department at 255-6896. Do It Center, your partner in home improvements.
At Blue Box, we now carry and are fully stocked in granola fertilizers, urea 46%.